So it looks really, really bad for that certain nameless person. Why? Because you have a research article published in the Journal of Forensic Psychology, Research and Practice, talking about their case, talking about them and their credibility. And guess what? They're not credible at all. This stuff, it will reach academics. More and more people will hear about this. Yeah, buckle up, because you and I, we got a lot to talk about. So hey there to all you fine folks on this fine day, by the way. So this is something that nameless person does not want. They don't want this kind of scrutiny at all. Why? Because academics, they'll tear through that UK judgment. They'll talk about the injustices in that. They'll put it in classes and make case studies out of it. And yeah, once that happens, you're going to have a lot of problems. So this talks about the assessment of credibility of testimony in alleged, you notice that, alleged intimate partner violence, a case report. Now, the abstract of this, it's actually quite interesting. Why? Because it talks about structured assessments of witness credibility versus an unstructured approach, and how it can impact judgment. AKA, that nameless person may have well walked away because you didn't have a structure in place. As they note, unstructured approaches, they may follow general, long-accepted guidelines in legal proceedings, but they ignore empirical knowledge about perpetrators and victims produced by years of research. Furthermore, judgments are at a high risk of being compromised by the characteristics of the informant, that would be that certain nameless person, the listener, that would be the judge, and the situation. You know, when you're talking about some element that falls into the listen and believe category. An accurate analysis of witness credibility is harder to accomplish and more essential when there's no conclusive evidence, or when the alleged perpetrator denies the accusation or has no known history of interpersonal violence. To not believe real victims or wrongfully convict innocent individuals are miscarriages of justice that might be prevented to a certain extent if we improve credibility assessment accuracy. Now, what they do in this is they look at that certain nameless person's judgment. They apply a structured credibility analysis to this, and they want to see if this could have produced a different judgment. And hey, guess what? It could. It could indeed. Now, as far as background or the introduction portion of this is concerned, I skip over the majority of it because you already know what's happened. But I think that this is actually something you should know about. Why? Because it shoots down so many narratives, and it showcases what structured versus unstructured is all about. So this trial here, the defendant, and again, remember, the defendant is not that nameless person. We're talking about the Sun, and we're talking about NGN, have to prove that the allegations of accosting occurred, i.e. application of the UK Defamation Act in 2013. In other words, the defendant had to prove that JD accosted that nameless person, causing her to suffer significant injury and leading to her fearing for her life. Being a libel trial, the balance of probability applies. Now, what that means is the court, they're called to determine whether the occurrence of the event was more likely than not. Therefore, the standard of evidence is lower than in a criminal case. Now, since we're talking about an unstructured judgment here, you have 30 witnesses, 8 of them in support of the nameless person, 22 in support of JD, all providing evidence. Now, the judge, he continually relies on that nameless person, on their friends, and on the sister's testimony, finding that stuff credible, heavily relying on them despite the availability of other evidence and more credible testimonies, including the police, by the way. They testified as well, Gus concluding that it actually did happen in 12 of 14 incidents. Now, as far as the materials are concerned, let's just say they're the opposite of mainstream journalism. They decide they're going to look at everything, and then they're going to put it through a method. So, 7 witness statements of that nameless person, 8 witness statements and depositions in support of that nameless person, 22 witness statements and depositions in support report of JD, audio recordings between the two, a video of JD recorded by that nameless person, notes produced by health professionals, that means doctors, nurses, psychotherapists, concerning their assistance to that nameless person, multiple photos and text messages between different persons produced by that nameless person as evidence to support the statement, and CCTV footage produced by JD as evidence to support his statement. They also talk about other items, including looking online to see if there's ever been anything like this reported at all before. And this guy, he's been under the scrutiny of the paparazzi. Yeah, they look through everything, like I said. Now, as far as methodology is concerned, I'm going to break this down as simply as possible. It's a little bit more complicated than the way I'm explaining it, but still, I think that it's the way to explain it to everyone. Essentially, you have 6 factors of analysis. You can see them all lined up here. Factor 1, objective verification. Do we have police complaints? Do we have medical records? Observations by neutral third parties? Here, they look at photographs, they look at video materials, and other factors in that. Factor 2, they look at patterns of accosting complaints. They're looking at whether there are official or unofficial complaints of others making allegations about this, if they're credible, even if they've never been prosecuted. Factor 3, corroboration. Now, notice this word here, by credible others. They talk about who is credible here, how exactly that you can figure that in. And factor 4 weighs on that too, talking about the absence of disconfirming verbal reports by credible third parties. So they consider that as well. Factor 5, psychological profile and past history of accosting behavior by the alleged perpetrator of the marital violence. And then factor 6, you have psychological status of the alleged victimized spouse. Now, as far as results are concerned, we'll skip around somewhat, but I like this section here. Listen to this. This shoots down so many arguments, by the way. Objective verification. The nameless person never reported to the police as ever being a victim of physical accosting by JD. An anonymous person first, and later a friend of that nameless person, contacted the police on the night of the last reported alleged incident. So, they didn't do anything until the very end. When, that money train, it's going to be cut off. 2 different patrols, they attend the calls, but that nameless person did not report that type of behavior by JD to any of the officers. 2 of the officers, these are officers with extensive training in this as well, testified they saw nothing at all on that nameless person or any indication that that nameless person had been harmed, nor did they see traces of property damage, vandalism, any other clue that had been made supposing that an altercation had occurred. Now, a factor that I think is really telling about all of this is the lack of medical evidence they bring up. They say, in total, they looked at 10 annotations from nurses, a medical doctor, and a psychotherapist, mainly regarding incidents 8 and 12. Remember, by the way, a lot of stuff supposedly happened in those incidents, and yet there are no records of physical injury seen on that nameless person besides a bleeding lip. The health professionals refer to the altercations between the spouses as quote-unquote arguments. You don't call that an argument when you make notes. Let me tell you that as somebody that has worked in mental health and labeled the marriage a quote-unquote toxic relationship and quote relationship volatile and destructive. I saw no indication that the health professionals involved suspected any IPV situation, nor did they take any action despite the multiple times that nameless person said she complained of them. So they didn't believe her. In fact, if you look at this right here, after incident 13, that nameless person disclosed by text messages to the nurse who used to visit her that JD had accosted her. Nevertheless, the nurse, they simply reply by saying, "Wow, that sounds scary," but they don't ask if there's an injury. They don't ask if they need medical attention. Why? Because this person, they don't think that there's a problem. They find them untruthful. Now, as far as reporting is concerned, oh yes, indeed, that nameless person made reports as far as text messages are concerned to parents, sisters, friends, medical staff, and more, saying that JD was indeed accosting her. The problem here is credibility. There is no positivity as far as credibility is concerned, with this person saying they were socially isolated and they weren't. They had multiple person interactions throughout the day, and these people, they were their friends. They were people that should be able to count on. Furthermore, 4 of the alleged incidents, they occurred in public spaces: motel, hotel, airplane, and train. And more than that, you have that nameless person saying this stuff, it was directly witnessed by others, such as friends, sisters, people related to JD. No one intervenes, though, never taken to a medical sitting. Nobody encourages that nameless person to ever file a report or gives that nameless person shelter. On the contrary, text messages from that nameless person's parents demonstrate that JD and them, they actually had a continual friendly relationship throughout the marriage, and that nameless person's friends continue to neighbor her rent-free in dwellings owned by JD. Now, as far as corroboration is concerned, again, you have 30 witnesses. All 8 of that nameless person's witnesses, they are excluded because they have too many conflicts of interest. But out of JD's side, only 7 of the 22 are actually discounted. From the 15 testimonies considered credible, 2 were JD's ex-partners, were considered only for the factor of analysis 5, specifically to characterize his history of accostive behavior. No credible witnesses at all corroborated that nameless person's account of events. Now, another part, the absence of disconfirming verbal reports of credible third parties. All of these folks, they go against what that nameless person says. 2 estate managers with no contractual relationship with JD at the time of their deposition, they say never saw JD do any of this stuff, saw the nameless person all the time, and they didn't have any of this on them. And one of them even says that they saw that nameless person altering evidence. The concierges as well that were in the shared home, where the 2 lived in the Eastern Columbia building, all of them said they saw that nameless person up close. They saw her makeup free, never had anything wrong with her at all. The stylists, they also back up this as well, saying they could clearly see that nameless person. They could clearly tell what was going on. Nothing was visible. And the police, they said there was nothing at all going on. They saw no signs. And you know what? Body cam footage ends up backing up everything they said too. Now, as far as psychological profiles are concerned, these are very telling. Why? Because JD, he does indeed have substance abuse issues. He's experiencing economic turmoil, but he's always had substance abuse issues. And you know what? None of these claims have ever surfaced, ever materialized in the past. That nameless person, though, they say all of this stuff, it's constant. Despite that, though, none of the mental health professionals that attended her, they make any reference to that whatsoever. What they say instead is that nameless person notes high levels of anxiety because JD is absent rather than fear of any type of behavior, any type of accosting or whatsoever. For example, one nurse noted that client continues to state that her anxiety is worsened by unknown status of relationship with her husband. There are also notes from the nurse that discredit what that nameless person expressed she felt based on her behaviors. For example, client expresses feeling sad, RN met client appears in good spirits, laughing, socializing, appetite normal. It is noteworthy, too, that nameless person's behavior showed that they were not afraid of JD, contrary to their words. Although that nameless person expressed she was frightened by JD, might do if she left the relationship, and therefore needed a TRO, she stated, well, when he's gone, I don't need that anymore. Furthermore, audio recordings of one meeting sought by that nameless person alone from JD notes that the TRO, well, it's not needed at any time. Basically, that it's based on untruths. When you look at this and you think about it along structured analysis terms, actually being hypercritical of what's going on, you see a much different outcome than what you saw previously. That should wake up people. It should alarm them too, and it should make them second guess not only what's going on here, but second guess this social movement where you go and you make accusations alone, they burn down lives. Oh yeah, it's such a mess, and hopefully some of this stuff can be remedied. But anyway, let me know what you think about this stuff. And as always, appreciate the heck out of you. You make this stuff work, so thank you. Want to help out the channel? There are links in the description. Appreciate the heck out of you checking those out too. You being here, though, that matters. So thank you. I appreciate you. And we're going to end here with a see you soon.